We spoke yesterday of the wave of pogroms in Tsarist Russia. That wasn't supposed to happen. After all, things were supposed to be getting better. After all, hadn't the Jews been emancipated in the Habsburg Empire? They'd been emancipated in this united Germany that Bismarck had founded. They had total equality in the French Third Republic, which was established in 1875. They were dedicating the great Klomatsky Synagogue in the center of Warsaw, which had been a stronghold of Yiddish-speaking Hasidic Jews. But the pogroms were like a red light. They were like a warning light. And many maskilim who had believed in a better future now began to rethink their optimism. People like Peretz Smolenskin, Moshe Leib Lilienblum, and Leon Pinsker now began to ask themselves, is it really true that anti-Semitism is just a holdover from the past? Perhaps modernization, urbanization, economic change, the rise of capitalism, the rise of new nationalisms on the part of many of the smaller peoples in Europe, that all of this will lead not to less anti-Semitism, but to more. One of the most cogent examples of this emerging doubt in the optimism of the Haskalah was a seminal pamphlet published in German in 1882 by Leo Pinsker. Now, you might say that Leo Pinsker could be the poster child of the Haskalah. He was everything that Maskilim hoped an ideal Jew would be. He grew up in Odessa, not in some little shtetl in the Pale. He was a military doctor in the Crimean War. He was decorated by the Tsar himself. It doesn't get any better than that. And yet, as Pinsker saw Jews like himself get beaten up on the streets, not Jews in payas and kaftans, but so-called modern Jews, so-called educated Jews, the kind of Jews who would have followed every recommendation that Yehuda Leib Gordon made in his poem. They spoke Russian. They had degrees. They were useful to their fatherland. Pinsker began to ask himself, what's wrong with this picture? And he found plenty that was wrong. And he asked himself, is anti-Semitism really something that simply depends on the Jews changing? Is it simply a result of Jews behaving badly? Is it true, is the assumption true that if Jews only change their behavior, anti-Semitism will disappear? What is wrong with this whole idea? What is wrong with this whole hankering? What is wrong with this whole yearning for emancipation? Emancipation presupposes that the Jews are passive, that they're waiting for the favor of being made equal to everybody else, that they're hungrily asking for recognition, reminding their so-called betters that now they know how to speak, they know how to behave. They've even stopped being hucksters and speculators, and they're contributing to their fatherland. See, we're better. Emancipate us. And Pinsker said, And I want to remind you that Pinsker was a doctor, and he was now approaching the problem from what he believed was a scientific point of view. And he believed that you had to give a diagnosis of the Jewish people as a sick people. And a basic hallmark of this sickness is that the Jews were even clueless about what ailed them. The Jews were totally clueless about their situation. They were totally ignorant of the real dangers that threatened them. And then he began to talk about anti-Semitism. And he reminded his readers that anti-Semitism is a very dynamic and a very elusive kind of a concept. The rich often hate the Jews because they're poor. And the poor hate the Jews because they're rich. Conservatives hate the Jews because they're bomb-throwing anarchists and socialists. Bomb-throwing anarchists and socialists hate the Jews because they're rich bankers. Devout Catholics suspect the Jews not only because they killed Christ, or devout Protestants too, but because they're secular, they're atheists, they're not God-fearing, they're a threat to all those who want religion to serve as a basis of social life. But secularists hate Jews because they wear payas and beards, and they're excessively religious, and they keep to themselves. Jews are attacked for trying to integrate. They're pushy. They're going where they're not wanted. And Jews are attacked for being by themselves. They're clannish. They don't want to be part of the general society. And Jews are also now involved in the emerging crossfires of national rivalries and class rivalries. Czechs suspect Jews because they support the Germans. Poles attack the Jews for supporting the Russians, while Russians attack the Jews for supporting the Poles. And so Pinsker said, what emerges from all this, and not just Pinsker said this, but other Maskilim too, what Pinsker says, what emerges from all this is that Jews are disliked in a way that other people are not disliked. And we can go further and say that, in a sense, you take what you don't like and you attach it to the Jew. And we could even see this today. It used to be that in the 1930s, allegiance to the nation state was considered a laudable value. And Jews were told, you're strangers in our nation state. You're cosmopolitans. You can't be a true German or a Jew or a true Pole. Go to Palestine and then we won't mind you so much. And today, when the nation state is often identified with atavistic tribalism, Jews are told you are symbols of an outmoded idea of ethnic nationalism. If you only leave Palestine, then we will like you. And so the story goes on and on. What was the remedy that Pinsker suggested? The remedy was to change the existential position of the Jewish people by rooting the Jewish people in a territory.